We're going to get started. So first of all, thanks to everybody for coming to the event, either through Bolton Access or live. We very much appreciate your time. Thank you. And we hope to answer all your questions. And as we go through the slides, if there's anybody here live who has a question, perhaps you can just raise your hand and we'll try and stop the presentation at the time and answer the questions as they come up so you don't have to store them and remember them in your mind. And then for those on Bolton Access, they're going to come into Dennis and we'll probably save those for the end. And those can be submitted at goodleafquestions to goodleafquestions@gmail.com. And that web address is on the bottom of the Bolton Access broadcast. So without further ado, I think we're going to get started. I did want everybody to know that one of the reasons why we're excited about working with the town here is that my brother lived here for 30 years. He and I ran a business here for 7 years. And I loved the town. Went on many walks, bike rides during lunch while working, capture the flag games at my brother's little farm in Bolton here. He's since moved up to Vermont for retirement, but we have a long history here. So with that being said, we'll get started on things. This is a fairly long slideshow, but if it doesn't address the questions that you want answered, we'll do our best to answer them. And if we can't answer them, we will get back to you. We'll make sure you give us your contact information and we'll get back to you. Okay, we're not going to guess at anything. Okay. Okay, so this is a summary of how we plan to operate the business, sort of an overview picture. So in Bolton here, we're looking at the site at 58 Main Street, which is of course pretty close to the Stowe border. And it's a great site because it's in the woods, so nobody can see it. And we're going to have no retail there of any kind. We're going to have no delivery of any kind. It's only going to be a cultivation center and a manufacturing center. That's it. And now, because we're going to be operating it that way here, we are also in the process of looking for dispensary locations in other towns, for now at least. And we plan, therefore, to have a vertically integrated business, meaning everything we grow and sell is ours, because that way we can control the quality. And the reason why that's important is the quality of our team, I believe. So I'm going to introduce them now. I'm going to start with Vinny Posca. Vinny, can you raise your hand, please? So Vinny was the head of all of cultivation for the Slater Compassion Center, which is a medical center, medical marijuana center. And Vinny developed their entire product line, including their hospital product line for the Hasbro Children's Hospital. And the Slater Center is still using all his products today, even though he has been working with us for the last 3 years. So the Slater Compassion Center was a $130 million business. So he's one of the co-directors of all cannabis operations. The other one, Kenny, will you please stand up or raise your hand, is Kenny LaFauci. And well, Kenny was running all of product development, research, and production at the Slater Center. Kenny was running all of cultivation. So we've got the twin pieces of expertise that we need on a very large scale to make sure that we do this in a very responsible way for the town. Also on the team is Dennis, will you just raise your hand? Is Dennis Cardiff. And Dennis is highly involved in his own town's politics, which are in Framingham, Massachusetts. He's also an entrepreneur in the education space. He had an education technology company which was very successful. He grew from as a startup to become the dominant provider in eastern Massachusetts to many schools for information systems. And Dennis and I have worked together for a long time now and are quite close friends. And then we also have Mark Brown. Mark, will you raise your hand? And Mark will be in charge of all of our real estate activities. And probably his son Nick, if you want to raise your hand, will be helping him with that. So that's the executive team as we have it today. I'm going a little bit off the slide schedule, but I'm going to impart all the information I can here. It's our policy to be good corporate partners, particularly the town I'm so fond of. And so what does that mean? We'll have a whole slide on how we plan to work with the town a little later on. So I'm not going to spend more time on that, but it is a philosophy of ours, and that's the point I wanted to get across. Because it's a vertically integrated business, we are going to control all the quality and supply from seed to sale, which I think, again, you can be rest assured that because it's our product, we're going to want it to be the best possible product. Lastly, we have a bunch of interested investors who have been interested for a long time and are essentially waiting for us to commensurate a host community agreement with the town, which is what we hope to do in Bolton relatively soon, subject to working through all the requirements for the town. And so that's really mostly what I wanted to say on this slide. Are there any questions on this slide before I move on?
I'll be not a part of it. So you have a sister company that's actually working for real estate. So you do the management is both related.
Yeah, the management's going to own parts of both companies, as will the investors. There won't be any other owners. So it's just, you're supposed to, the CCC thinks it's better to have the two companies separate, so that's what we're going to do. Yeah, it's the same, it's exactly the same people. Yeah. We may own a little bit more of the company, percentage basis as a management team, and a little less of the property or vice versa, but it's going to be the same group of investors and the same group of managers. The exact ownership percentages may be a little different.
Who's the other partner? The other investor?
Well, the other investors are all significant business owners, and until we've really commensurated a host community agreement, we're supposed to keep that confidential.
Why?
Because we haven't signed agreements with them yet. We need to have a host community agreement first, and they don't want to be getting calls from people. So, pardon me?
Calls from who?
From people, from the public, or whatever. So it's very traditional and typical for people to keep their investors at this stage keep their identities.
The reason why I asked is because the letter you sent to us says that you're going to be very transparent. And right now, they're starting off with non-transparency.
Well, we're going to be very transparent about our operation. We're telling you that we're going to be owners in the business. And the other people are private citizens, they're not companies.
So I have a question. Is any one of the investors that you're talking about, have they applied for a fund or for
No,
There's no ties to anybody that's tried to establish a business that would be in the street?
well, we have another individual who will own part of the property and may be part of the non-decision-making management team, Nick Catt, who has come, who first found the opportunity. He will not be part of the decision-making team because the decision-making team is in this room. It's the five of us that I've introduced to you today.
Okay, so the answer is yes. There is some that require to get into establishment before they can.
Yes.
How did you get in touch with them? How did you guys become investors?
You need to go to Mike, because they're on television.
What I'm saying
They're on television.
is, Nick Cat wasn't able to move forward, so I introduced Ben James to that part.
And as such, we were able to establish a rapport with the town administrators and the selectmen. We made how many presentations so far? Two, three? And we answered all the questions that the selectmen had, and specifically about how this program is going to move forward. And also, they don't want Nick Catt in a decision-making managerial position, and we agreed to do that. Nick's got a lot of time and money invested in it. He knows he doesn't have the position they thought he had, so he's a very minor, let's say, equity partner. But he's not going to be running the company in any way. No decision-making, there'll be an executive committee, and he won't be part of it.
What do you feel
Thank you.
you guys decide to bring in?
We won't.
We won't. We know who he is, he's agreed to it, and he's going to sign off on the contract stating that.
How much did he do?
So I have another question. How do people find out about this location?
Actually, Nick found it. When it was under agreement with Tomasco, and that deal fell apart, he contacted the brokers at CBRE.
So Nick contacted you folks,
I had been working with Nick on other opportunities in other parts of the state.
but he contacted you on this location?
Yeah, because we were working together in other locations. We've been working on something in Brighton, Massachusetts, where that deal's not happening, but we stayed in touch. He asked me to get involved, and I did.
Okay.
All right? Thank you.
There's another question here. Can I ask a question? Leo Thompson, 51, Walton, right?
Hi, Leo. Nice to meet you.
So, even though you're education, obviously know people on the street, it's happened.
I know that some people were, and
You're already, you must have known.
we've known that some people,
So, I'm just.
can I just finish, please? We've known that some people didn't like the last people that came through. We're a new group, and we understand that some people may not like what we have to say, and we'll have to see if we can satisfy them.
And I think good people, we like people and all that. If you don't want it, I hate it. Period. I'll just leave it at that. When that's the answer, you will come to solicitation.
Okay,
The people on the street don't want it.
okay.
You didn't want to discuss it for home, correct?
So I don't want it, period.
Okay, but there's a whole lot of people that live
I'm
in the
worried
neighborhood.
about my real estate, okay? And that's a genuine concern to everybody on that street. I don't know what that does. You know, somebody make a law, tell me about if the people are gonna buy in the neighborhood, go with the kids, only they can now want them. Okay? I'm just telling you, people on the street, I can't speak for everybody, I can speak for myself. Basically, that you don't want it on the street. You have to talk to everybody.
I see it, and make sure it's in, so you're not selling anything on the street.
I don't care, I don't want it, I'm worried about my real estate.
So
We're
I'll,
talking about a lot of money here to protect our real estate.
so I
Now,
will,
if you wanna give us a kickback, we're all interested.
no, that's illegal. We're not gonna do
So
that.
other than that, we can move on.
So, And
Yeah, I know.
I have a few more things to say on this topic, which is one that if this were for example, a brewery would use a lot more water, it'd be a lot louder. In fact, they could use as much water as they wanted without they could just drill a well and use as much water as they wanted without any requirements. And the building has sat empty for 3 years, and property values are generally higher when abutting properties are much higher, are generally higher, values are generally higher when an industrial space nearby is not vacant. And because the marijuana business is so tightly controlled, there's much more definition for the abutters around what the business can and can't do around lighting, water use, noise, odor, everything. So it's actually an extremely controlled environment. So in many instances in the industry, property values actually go up. So that's what I know about.
I have a question on
Yeah.
that. So we talked about this in prior meetings about the value of the house. So you're telling us that when your business goes in, the value of our houses is going to go up. So
No.
there's been other companies that grow marijuana. What happens to the value of the houses when these businesses went in? Did they go up or did they go down? Please don't speak in generalization. I absolutely like to know facts. I like to know surveys. I don't want to say some or most or something like that.
Well, there
You
are
don't
no.
have to have the answer now, but I don't think the value goes up until marijuana sells. I really don't.
Well, there is no industry data. Number one, no.
Oh,
No,
there's
industry.
data, there's many dispensaries, there's many cultivation, there's many growers. You have to have information. There's thousands of these throughout the country. So you should be able to get some information somewhere. There's got to be surveys, there's got to be information. Government should have it, the federal government should have it. So when you're telling me that there's no information out there,
Well, let's put it this way. I haven't found it in a federal website, and I haven't found it on the CCC, and that's the federal and state. But we'll look for it, and we will do our best to find whatever we can. What I was trying to get at is that there's been no survey that takes every instance into account, and I can tell you there are plenty of specific instances where properties go up, properties go down, and there's probably some where properties stay the same. So it's probably a mixture. And it's probably going to depend.
Which one do you know of that go up? Because you said they can go up. But if you're telling me that it's definite, that
No, I'm not
value goes
telling
up, you just said it. The scientists said that it goes up. Some go up, some go down. I'm not asking the ones that go up. So when we move forward with another question, is what happens if the value of our houses go down because of the company that you're putting in the backyard trying to go in? What happens then?
Well, the house values could go down for other reasons, so I don't know how you attribute it to the business necessarily. So,
What if people can't sell their houses at certain values because they directly say there's a marijuana plant at the end of our street and we don't want it with our kids? And we also are worried about safety. We're also worried about the water supply being drained. We're also worried about the smell that's going to come up into our neighborhood.
well,
Those all factor into the value of houses.
Yep, and we'll address most of those issues in this presentation. So, smell, traffic, all those things. We're also closing off all the egress and ingress between Bolton Woods Way and the facility. So we actually won't be on your street. We will be using the driveway off 117. And we will endeavor to get you as many statistics as we can. So if you will leave one of us with your contact information, we will endeavor to find whatever we can about property values for you.
You can set it up to all of us. I mean, you're not interested in being more posted on the website. You have a website that goes there.
Okay.
Put it on the internet like you're telling us to do it, or why don't you put it out there first?
What's that? Pardon me? Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. Will you remember that, Dennis? Okay, thank you. Okay. I just went through this slide, but there is a list of biographies that I think the selectmen have posted on their webpage, and you can look through that and see everybody's experience. And you may have already done that. Are there any questions for anybody on our backgrounds? Yes. You want the microphone? Oh, okay. Okay. I'll repeat the question, sir. Is that what you want me to do? Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so there was a question about property values for abutters, and we are going to get as much information as we can on that and post it on the website. And then there was an expressed opinion that one of the residents nearby doesn't want this under any circumstances. So that was the give and take for the last 5 minutes or so, I believe. Is that fair? Yeah. So does anybody have any more questions on the team slide? No. Good. Okay. We have a top-notch team of advisors, and a lot of these people are here today. Joel, do you want to stand up? This is Joel Frisch from Northeast Geosciences. He's a water resource expert, and he'll be presenting a little later on. And then we have Jacob Lemieux. Jacob, do you want to stand up or raise your hand? And Jacob is with Hancock Associates, and both Jacob and Joel have done a lot of work in this area. Then we have Eric Gaff. Eric, you want to raise your hand or stand up? And Eric is with BLW Engineers. And he has, we're in good hands with Eric as well. He's been involved in over 40 projects in this space. And then we've got Advantage Builders. We're one of the leading builders. We are in the process of choosing the architecture firm. And we have Centec, and Andy's one of the leaders in his industry for noise control. He works a lot with audio and video people. In fact, he's working on a big space in my hometown, Concord, Massachusetts. He's working on a big audio project there with a friend of mine. And then we have McMahon Associates for the traffic. And these are all based in the Boston area, so they're nice and close. So it's a nice team, I think. And it's a top team that will deliver top quality services. So if I flip this way. I don't have the best eyes without glasses, so just bear with me. Okay. Okay, the P got misaligned, but sort of the permitting process that we're anticipating going through is for the site at 58 Main Street in Bolton, Massachusetts. It's zoned with the industrial overlay zoning that was designated by the town as marijuana establishment ready. And we will be applying for CCC licenses for a cultivation and manufacturing establishment, not a retail establishment. We are seeking a host community agreement approved by the Select Board of Bolton, a special permit application approved by the Town of Bolton Planning Board, and Select Board of Bolton, after all special permit bylaws, requirements, including but not limited to industrial district and marijuana bylaws in terms of setbacks, buffer zones, and anything else are met. All required Bolton Board of Health permits, including but not limited to well and septic permits, after meeting all local bylaws, site plan approval from Select Board, occupancy permit, after design review and meeting all requirements and inspections of Bolton's building authorities and the CCC actually, and any other required local, state, and federal permits, including but not limited to DEP permits, Department of Environmental Protection, and that's a state agency. Any other questions on that slide? Okay. Okay, this is an overview of what we hope to do on the site. We can get into more detail later. As shown here, the site is at 50. Both sites at 58 Main Street. There are two buildings there right now. One of 36,000 square feet and one of 8,000 square feet. The plan would be to put the cultivation center in the larger building, obviously, and it would be a 20,000 square foot to 30,000 square foot canopy. There would be a small extraction lab and a kitchen in the other building of 2,500 and 1,500 feet respectively, roughly. The property was discrete in that it is in the woods. You can't even see it from the road. I hear you. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No problem. The nearest school is over 3 miles away. There's going to be, we're going to take the canopy center and we're going to divide it into multiple rooms so that each room will have its own HVAC system. The rooms will average about 2,500 square feet, so they're probably going to be between 8 and 12 of them. And the whole complex will have state-of-the-art negative pressure technology, carbon filters, and various other features, as well as insulation infrastructure to deal with noise and odors. And we'll talk more about that in a little while. The staff needs will be in excess of 30 and up to 58 people, which was much smaller than the last business there, which was 75. And we'll talk about the impact on traffic as well. It should generate some substantial revenues for the town, which we presume will help the school district, and that should also help property values, or whatever they want to spend it on, but it should help the town with its spending. So that should be good for the town as well. And the site has a public well previously approved for 960 gallons a day by the DEP to be used for domestic purposes. And we're going to go before the DEP. We're already in that process. Jules can talk more about this later. But you know, that was for 75 employees, so we're going to be far less than that. So we should not be taxing that at all. We do plan on building a private well subject to the town's approval of the DEP. Our irrigation needs will approximate 6,000 gross gallons daily, but we're going to have net irrigation water needs much lower than that. That should say, well, between 200 and 1,800. The 200 is unlikely, very unlikely. The 1,800 range is more likely. And that's going to be based on a water recycling system that Eric is going to put in the facility. Any questions on this so far? We're going to talk more about most of this. Okay. Let me start here. I'll repeat the question. What are the laboratory requirements? Vinny, do you want to talk about that?
In terms of what would you like to know? Yep, the laboratory will be filtered with a negative pressure system, so nothing escapes the laboratory, no fumes, there's not going to be any solvents leaking into the atmosphere, there's not going to be any smells associated with any chemicals or anything like that. But it's an all-natural process.
What is the laboratory for?
Mainly extraction.
So that means, you want to explain why we extract?
Yeah, so basically we'll be taking the active material off of the plant material and concentrating it down with all natural substances. And like I said, nothing gets released into the atmosphere at all. Does that answer your question? We actually reclaim everything in the laboratory and reuse it constantly so that we know how to dispose of it.
Can you repeat what that question was?
Yes, she was asking what are the regulations around the laboratory. So.
Okay, so you have another question?
I did.
Yeah.
And then somebody else did after you. Okay.
So, are you aware that there is a bus stop for the high school kids right at that location?
Yes, we are aware of that, and we have had a discussion with the. Sure. The question was, are we aware of the fact that there's a bus stop right at the intersection of Bolton Lewis Way and 117, which is right near the facility? And yes, we are aware of that, and we've had conversations with the Board of Selectmen about that, and we have discussed, their primary concern has been traffic. So we have discussed arranging our shifts so that they don't coincide with the bus traffic. And then in terms of how we're dealing with minors, there's going to be more on that later.
So, I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
What is the distance of a bus stop to a marijuana facility? Can you repeat that question?
What is the distance of a bus stop to a marijuana facility? Do you mean what are the regulations about it?
That's what I mean.
Okay.
What's legal in Massachusetts?
Okay, so
How close can any school bus or school or anything, how close to the proximity that's allowed?
okay, so for any school, it's 500 feet. Any school. For a bus stop, one of the things we did not do today was bring lawyers because we wanted this to be as open a meeting as possible. So I don't believe there's any regulation.
There is a regulation, I've read it before, once it's changed, there is a regulation for public lot.
Okay,
And you guys are gonna build a facility that is within that business. I'm surprised you guys don't know it.
I think you would have said something. Selectmen would have said something. We had long discussions on the bus stop.
Eric?
I don't know what to tell you on that, without your discussion.
There's nothing, according to Eric, who's built 40 of these.
I would recommend you check with your attorney.
Yeah, we'll check with our attorney.
What if it's within the business, are you gonna do that?
We'll have to talk to the town and talk to you guys and figure it out together. Yeah. No problem. So the question was, what solvents will we be using? Is that correct? Okay.
So in terms of solvents, we're not going to be using any traditional solvents like butane or propane. A lot of these facilities use those, and they can be dangerous if they're inhaled. So we're not going to be using those dangerous hydrocarbon solvents. We're going to be using alcohol. It's the same alcohol that you can buy at the liquor store. And then, like I said before, we reclaim. Yeah, Everclear. Then we reclaim all of the Everclear or ethanol, as it's called in the laboratory. We're going to be reclaiming it using various devices and then condensating it back into its original form for reuse. So it's a closed loop cycle.
Do people wear masks?
Do people wear masks in the laboratory when that process is happening? It's really not needed because the levels of ethanol in the air are so low, it's considered safe from OSHA standards.
Okay, there was another question over here earlier from somebody. There was another question over here earlier from somebody. No? Okay. Sure, we can answer that now, or we can wait until that part of the presentation comes. It might make sense to do that. Is that okay? Okay, because that way everybody will be able to hear the presentation and it may answer your question. And if it doesn't, please let us know. Okay? Anybody else? Okay. Did you raise it? No? Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. If you want to ask a question, please interrupt. Okay, sorry, I have to get down here and see because I need my reading glasses. All right. Okay. This is an overview of the plant cultivation operations. Again, I keep repeating this, but it's going to be at 58 Main Street. There will be a genetics operation inside of it. Our current plans contemplate using hydroponic growing. There is a chance that we would use soil, but it's probably going to be hydroponic. And what that means is that we won't even need any soil deliveries. So we'll get into the merits of why we think this kind of operation is actually a very predictable operation to have next to a residence in a little while. The cultivation will be fully indoor. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to have roughly 8 to 12 separate rooms, so we have reliability, so that there's, if part of the crop gets tainted, the whole crop doesn't get tainted. We don't expect the crop to be tainted very often, if at all, but sometimes things like that happen, and then we'll have to pull it all and dispose of it. We will implement a water recycling and conservation system to recapture most of the water, 75 to 90% of it, in all probability, or 70 to 90%. Each room will have its own dedicated HVAC system. And it's the HVAC systems that will condense and recapture the water, along with some piping and various other things that Eric is an expert at and can answer any questions about a little later on. And we will talk about the water use in a little while. And Kenny, who you met earlier, as I said, is highly qualified to do this. He ran a very large cultivation operation, much larger than we're going to have for a number of years. Next.
I have a quick question on that last water.
Sure.
If you're recycling the water at 90%, why do you still need 6,000 gallons a day?
That's the 6,000 gross gallons a day.
Can you repeat my question?
Sure. If we're going to recycle 70 to 90% of it, why do we need 6,000 gallons a day? We won't need 6,000 gallons a day. Is the answer to the question. We'll get more into that later because it's essentially the same question you're asking. And Eric is going to talk about that. And if that doesn't satisfy your questions, then we'll try and dig deeper into it.
So was I just reading out there what the information goes to?
Well, here, I'll go back to it. I'll go to the wrong slide here. See on a gross basis. So we don't want gross, we put 6,000 in there because we want it to be transparent, actually. But the net water usage is going to be much lower than that. And we'll get more into this a little later on. But that's why I underlined gross. We put the largest number up there that would happen without any recycling.
You don't have to forgive me. I don't know what gross is net.
So we'll get into this more in the volume of the presentation when Eric goes through his part of the presentation. And then if that doesn't satisfy your questions, we'll answer the questions, we'll try and answer the questions after he's done. Is that okay? Well, I can try and skip ahead 20 slides, but it interrupts the rhythm and it'll get answered by someone who knows more than I do.
Okay.
So. Okay. Manufacturing. So, Mindy's essentially told you a little bit about what's going to happen here, but the manufacturing center will be used to produce all our products that aren't actual flour. So things like tinctures, rubs, all those kinds of things. Those all need to be manufactured. And that's really what the extraction in the kitchen is for. And so there is a chance that based on various permitting initiatives that we have, as we look at other sites, that that we might have manufacturing somewhere else, but I believe it's unlikely. So we're going to go, we're asking for a license for the manufacturing center here because we think it's, at least at this point, the most logical place. And that would be in the small building along with the offices of the executive team and perhaps a small genetics room or a small research room, something like that. Everything else will be in the big building. So there's an extraction laboratory of approximately 2,500 feet and a kitchen of approximately 1,500 feet. Vinny, will you talk a little bit about the difference between the extraction and the kitchen?
So the kitchen will be slightly different than the laboratory. Basically, we'll be using the concentrated material that we're producing in the laboratory in the kitchen to produce a wide variety of edible products and topical products such as tinctures, topical salves, capsules, and different things like that. Does that answer your question?
We call it a kitchen because actually the main components of it are an oven and a refrigerator, right, Vinny? Yeah, so that's why we call it a kitchen. It's pretty simple, really. It's pretty basic. And as Vinny outlined earlier, the extraction process is pretty simple, particularly the way we're going to do it, because it's just using a natural substance, an alcohol, no hydrocarbons, as Vinny said. There's one other option, it's called the CO2 option, but we're unlikely to use that, and that presents no problems either from an environmental standpoint. Am I right in saying that? Yeah, okay. Okay, I apologize for keep having to do this. Pain in the butt for you guys. Okay, just to let you know how we communicated with people so far. We sent all our biographies to the selectmen and they put them up on their website. I believe, I mean, I haven't checked myself, but they said they were going to. And so you can view them all. We've met with Donald Lowe and his staff, Valerie, Rebecca, Jenny, and Chiefs Nelson and Legendre. We've met with Bill Brookings from the Shelburne Regional Board of Health. We've met with the Bolton Board of Health and Bill Brookings together. We prepared and published the public notice for this meeting, and we have drafted a proposed HCA agreement, which we will be sending it to the town and working with the town on. So that is the communication that we've had so far with the town officials. The next planned activities tonight, September 28th through October 14th, negotiation of a HCA after we see what the reaction is here. And then, we hope to receive approval in mid-October. We'll have to see. So now we're going to talk about our philosophy of good corporate citizenship. And we're going to talk about each one of these issues. Because these are generally the issues that people care about. And this is where a number of subject matter experts are going to talk. And the first one is actually going to be Joel. So Joel, you might want to come up to the microphone and I'll manipulate the slides for you. Just tell me when you want me to do that.
Good evening, Joel Frisch, Northeast Geoscience, we're in Clinton. So the project includes, as has been previously mentioned, water demands from two different types of water uses. Domestic water uses would be used for toilets, kitchens, etc. Yep. Domestic water uses and irrigation water uses are the two different water demands for the facility. The domestic water demands will be met by an existing public water supply well, which has been permitted previously through Mass DEP. That water source is a bedrock well, very similar to the wells serving all the buildings in town. That existing public water supply well is inactive and will be reactivated through the permitting process. Again, about 960 gallons a day is the limit. That's capped by DEP. They can't take any more than that. The irrigation well, again, that's a picture of a bedrock well. I'm sure everyone's familiar with those in town. The irrigation well would be a similar 6-inch diameter bedrock well that would be permitted through the Board of Health. Both of those sources would be tested through a testing protocol that is yet to be worked out. That's something we would work out with Neshoba. Bill Brookings, we would work with him and develop a scope of work for doing the testing. The normal testing process for an irrigation well or a private water supply well is simply drill the well, pump the well for a couple hours, take some water quality samples, and that's the end of it. There's nothing else required. The protocol that we would work with Bill and Neshoba on would be a much more robust testing protocol. Most likely, what I would envision for this site would be that we would pump both the existing public water supply well and the proposed irrigation well at some volume of water exceeding what they would ever use in a day. So we would pump both wells at the same time at those flow rates. So something over 960 gallons a day. Typically when you pump a public water supply well, you pump it at 133% of what your maximum use would ever be. So we would do that on this case. And we would also pump the irrigation well at probably 133% of the maximum volume we would ever use for 24 hours. So that's more water than this facility would ever use in a day. And when we do that testing, we also observe private wells in the area to ensure that there's no impacts. That's a very robust protocol. We've done that with Neshoba on previous projects. In fact, we just did it in Boxborough for a large condominium complex where we monitored a number of private and public wells in the area during the testing of the public water supply wells. So, questions? Yeah, the question is how do you monitor private wells? So there's two ways you can do it. One way is that the residents or well owners actually do the monitoring themselves. That can be done passively, where we let you know when we're doing the testing, and the owners of the wells can just simply keep an eye on their well, and if they notice a water quality or some issue with the amount of water the well is producing, they would let us know, and during the pumping test, we would go up and verify. We would have an independent well driller go up and verify that. There's another process that we use, which is we actually open up the well with the homeowner's permission and monitor the water levels in the well to make sure that there's no impact. Question? Yeah, so the question is, what was the previous water use? The existing water source at the facility is a public water supply well with an approved withdrawal rate of 960 gallons a day. And that was for roughly 75 employees. We're expecting fewer than that. And that 960 gallons a day is a cap. They can't take more than 960 gallons a day. And that's strictly limited by Mass DEP. No more than that. Because the question is.
No, that's not what the question was. The question, if you repeat my question, The question is, how much did the previous owner use?
The question is, how much did the previous owner use? They used less than 960 gallons a day.
That's not a good benchmark.
That's what they used.
That means that you don't know.
No, the public water system, just so everyone knows, has a certified operator that reports directly to Mass DEP. So they come in usually on a weekly to monthly basis. Every public water supply has to have a meter, and that meter is read by the operator every time they come to the site, and that information is sent directly to DEP. So DEP strictly limits withdrawals.
So you're checking DEP and you have the number?
I have the numbers.
So what are they?
Less than 960 gallons a day. That's the biggest number.
That's what they're allowed to do.
Correct.
Telling me it's less than 960 isn't really long.
It's an average usage, so you might have a
You
situation.
can't have an average usage of a limit.
Right, it's an average use per day. So there's days when they might have exceeded that, and there's days when they use no water at all. So the average is no more than 960 gallons a day. Now, just for scale, the typical house demand, and this is that 960 gallons a day is the Title V flow rate. So it's the wastewater flow. And so you can't, in order to have 960 gallons of wastewater, you need to have 960 gallons of water, clean water. And so for scale purposes, a residential 4-bedroom house has a flow of 440 gallons a day. So that facility used slightly more than 2 homes worth of water. So it's a very modest amount of water. So the question was, in order to understand the impacts on the wells, you would want to perform a test before and after. And in fact, that's exactly how we do the testing. Yeah, I don't have a protocol yet because that has to be worked out with the Board of Health. But for example, in Boxborough, the project we just did with Neshoba was you go out and run a baseline test on all the wells for all the homeowners that are interested in having the testing done. So we run the well and we measure the water level over a period of time, maybe a half an hour to an hour, and we see how the well responds to the pumping. We see what the static water level is, we see what the pumping water level is. Most wells in a house will pump for maybe 2 minutes at a time. They pump until the pressure tank is full, and then they turn off. So we run it for maybe 20 to 30 minutes, and we see what the response is in the pumping. Then we run the same test during this test, and we see if there's a difference. So you can actually plot the water levels before the test and during the test and see what the impact is. And what we're looking for impact, just so everybody knows, there's a thing called well interference. So everyone's well in the neighborhood interferes with everyone else's well. So when, house number 1 pumps their well, it draws down the water level in house number 2. In fact, it draws down everyone's well in the entire town. It's just that as you move away from that one well that you're interested in, like the well we're talking about at this facility, that amount of drawdown gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And, in this case, we'll see on the next slide, the nearest house is over 500 feet away. And so using the standard football field as a measurement, we're approaching 2 football fields away from this well. And you're only looking at withdrawal. Well, that number sounds big. 6,000 gallons a day, we're not going to use that. But even if we did, that amount of water is a garden hose. Not even a full blast garden hose. It's not, the scale it's, if you're not using these types of numbers every day, it may seem like a big number, but for example, the International uses over 100,000 gallons a day for irrigation. We're talking 1,800, probably as a maximum.
I have a question. You just
Yeah.
said that the nearest property is people fall fields away.
The nearest well to the proposed irrigation well.
Nearest well, I disagree with that. I walk up and down our neighborhood and I will disagree with what you said.
We'll look at it on the next slide.
Okay, and then the other thing is that right now, all the wells in our neighborhood are low. I mean, really low, like extremely low. How do I know that? I had my well replaced, my pump replaced about 2 years ago, and I had about this much water on my pump. And the gentleman who did our well, the pump, did all the wells in our neighborhood. So he knew very well, unintended, but he knew what those water limits were because he drilled it when he was 20 years old and he's now 40. He knew exactly how much water was out there. And he said, you guys are in trouble, your water is extremely low, all your pumps are probably going to break soon because the water is so low. I don't know how you can get that on the microphone, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, so the concern was is that, you know, a qualified driller has noted that he believes the water, excuse me?
You say it's
I said a qualified well driller has noted that he believes that the water levels are low in the neighborhood,
extremely low.
extremely low,
And it takes you to
whatever that means. Yeah,
what it means is it is a really bad situation.
yeah. It may be.
What it also means is that if you guys go to start taking 6,000 gallons a day out of our wells, that's going to be a problem for us. So this is a really important point that we've been making through all these meetings with all the other companies, is that water is an issue. When you go in and drilling 6,000 gallons a day, it's going to cause a problem for us. Financially, definitely. You definitely are going to impact all of our lives, and we're all going to have to re-drill our wells. That's a problem, and it's not a problem for you, obviously. And with the tone of everyone in this room, I've noticed, you don't seem to have a problem with that. You don't seem to have a problem with a lot of things that you're going over right now. We've touched upon this over and over again, and you should know this by now. You should know it from all your conversations with the selectmen. And Leo is right. We're all pretty much on board on this. I'd like to know who isn't on board in our neighborhood about our wells, because I can guarantee you they are. And it's going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars for us to re-drill our wells. And you guys don't seem to be concerned about it. You're giving us statistics that aren't really statistics.
So we're going to continue on with the presentation. That's not a question, these are just statements. I appreciate them. Believe me, from a water person, this is what I do every single day. The reason why I'm here is because these guys are concerned about water. No private well testing is required for this public water supply or the private water supply. None. None of the proposed monitoring that we're proposing to do is required. As Ben had mentioned earlier, you're getting all of the details on the water use at this facility that no other industry would ever have to tell you. A brewery could move into that place, put a well in, and pump as much water as they wanted, and you would have no say in it. Even if they dried up your wells, you would have no say in it.
You don't think we have to say you guys are our wells?
But no, what we're saying is we're going through an entirely unrequired, it's not necessary according to the regulations, but they're going the extra mile to test all the wells for everyone that wants to make sure there's no impacts. And the way we do that is we do the testing. If you said to me, promise me there's not going to be any impact, I can't. I have to do the testing.
And then when you do the testing, you find out how low the water levels are currently, and then you go ahead and start drilling. What are you telling us? Right now, you're telling me
At this point, we don't have any information on that.
tell me that you're going to be okay.
We're going to do the testing.
Knowing that our water supplies are low.
We don't know that until we do the testing.
You don't know
No,
that.
we don't. But there's a question over here.
Hypothetically, you sort of like in, 6 months after the fact, you guys can say, oh, that's really not. But what's, I guess, what's the standpoint of this facility, should that happen? Is the standpoint that, well, once it's
Yeah, so the question is, what's to happen if 6 months down the road, there is an impact on somebody's well?
yeah, what's that, rules that, not sure if that means that there is some buffer or the direction is the right consequence of all wrong.
So again, the reason why we do the testing, the way we do it, is to create, it's a robust testing program. The idea is to create a condition that should never be seen there. So we pump at a rate that you will never observe on that facility, and then we do the testing on the private wells to show there's no impact. We don't anticipate there being an impact. In fact, I've done a number of these community, neighborhood studies on all different kinds of water supplies, and I've never seen an impact. Now, again, well interference happens. Everyone's well in this room interferes with everyone else's well. The question is, does it impact your well enough to limit the amount of water you need to provide to your home? And that's what we're going to work with Board of Health to prove that. Right, so the question is, how do we prove that it's Goodleaf's issue versus someone else's issue? We may see that during the testing. That's one of the things. So, as I mentioned, a typical private well pumps for about 2 minutes. When it'll turn on for 2 minutes and then turn on. During our pump testing, we often will do antecedent readings. So there's static readings where we will put in data loggers into the wells on their property. And for 10 days, or maybe 15 days, measure the water levels where their facility is not pumping at all. And we can see the regional water level changes that occur at 6 a.m. Everyone starts waking up, taking showers, doing laundry. At about 4 p.m., everyone comes home from work, starts taking showers, doing laundry, etc. We can see those changes over time. And then we can see those sometimes actually during the pumping test. So we can get an understanding, and if we monitor, again, we don't have a protocol yet, we will work that out with Board of Health, but there's all different kinds of things we can do. If somebody wanted to have their well monitored during the entire period, we can do that. Yep, question? Right, so what are the drought concerns with this operation? The thing I think that's important for everyone to understand is the amount of money that they're investing in this facility. And so nobody has, at least from a dollar standpoint, a bigger investment in the water being maintained, the groundwater resource being maintained than this facility. They're putting millions of dollars into this thing. The last thing they want to do is dry up the groundwater. They need it for their operation. So they have a vested interest in maintaining the aquifer, just like you do. Question?
Yeah, so you said that you're doing the testing. Can you also, you folks get an independent tester as opposed to you guys doing the testing? Can we ask for an independent agency to come in and do the testing?
you would like to have an
Can
independent,
you repeat that, please?
yep, the question is, could we have an independent person do the testing? If you would like to have an independent person do your testing on your well, you could definitely do that. We'll work in coordination with those people. Question? The question is, what type of testing will occur on the wells, both the wells on this facility and in the neighborhood? And is there some type of approval process for the homeowners to opt into the testing? Yes, there is typically what we do is we devise this scope of work with the Board of Health. We send out a certified letter saying, this is the testing we're going to do. If you want to do it, please sign the form and send it back to us, and then we show up and do the testing. That's generally how it works. But we don't have a protocol until we work it out with Board of Health. Question? Yes, sir. That will be answered. So the question is, how big is the tank for recycled water? That will be answered later. I think it's 9,000 gallons. Is that what we? I don't know if that was Eric or Gina. Yeah. Okay, so 500% of the wastewater, which is 960 gallons a day maximum. So it's 5 times that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so, yeah, it's like 6,000 gallons of storage for the recycled water. I deal with this every single day. The question, so the comment was, the comment was regarding the potential impacts on private wells and whether there would be some contingency plan in the event that something happens. Right? That was at least one of the comments that you mentioned. And that's something that has to be negotiated with the selectmen on the agreement. We have worked on projects that had those types of agreements, that there would be some sort of a fund established, for example, to deepen wells if they needed to be deepened, that type of thing. The question is, are the selectmen voted in? I believe they're voted in. Questions? It's a complex, yeah, the question is, are the wells maybe closest to the facility more at risk than the ones further away? Just from just a well interference standpoint, the closer you would be in general, the higher the risk would be. That being said, bedrock wells are highly variable. The way the water from a typical well like we're using here the water gets into the wells through fractures. So the driller drills the rock and encounters fractures. And every single well in the neighborhood could have different fracture zones. They could be in different depths, they could provide different amounts of water. Some of the fractures actually lose water, some of the fractures gain water. It's very, very variable, it's highly complex. And so you can have wells that are within maybe 15, 20 feet of each other. One well produces 100 gallons a minute, and one well produces 0.1 gallons a minute. There's no way to know that. It's very, that's why we have to do the testing. Yeah, so the comment was, can the homeowners be notified with plenty of advance notice? As I mentioned, we typically notify everyone by certified mail weeks in advance of the testing. Just so everyone is aware, we wait until we get the green cards back that says everyone got the notice, and then we follow up with phone calls. Because we do testing, typically we do testing before the pumping test. So we would send up a letter, anyone who elected to do the testing, we would go out and do the testing before this test was actually the test on the wells at the facility. And then when that test happens, we go back out and test them again. Yeah, there would be plenty of notice for all the testing like that. Any other questions? No? Yeah, so the question is there any thoughts on trucking water into the site for irrigation? And that's really a traffic issue. It's a cost issue. I doubt that we considered trucking water to the site for irrigation.
We haven't explored trucking yet. We want to do the testing first and see what testing does. And we're also sensitive to the traffic issue, which is one reason why we're using hydroponics instead of soil, so we don't have trucks bringing soil into the facility. So we'll get more into the other issues as well. So we will be discussing traffic shortly. But we're going to do the testing, and we're going to test at levels that are well above where we would use water on a daily basis. And we're not going to, if the tests say that there's no impact on the wells, then we're not going to start trucking water, and certainly at that time. That's all that's all I can tell you right now. Do you want the microphone so you can explain what you're saying, or do you want me to try and paraphrase it? Yeah. So we ought to clarify a couple things. There's two uses of water. One is domestic, and that is expected to be less than 960 gallons a day. The irrigation use is something separate, and that's expected to be 1,800 gallons a day or less. Just want to make sure everybody understands that for full transparency. So, and again, if the testing is such that no wells are impacted, it doesn't make sense to do something that doesn't really help anything. So let's see what the testing does, and then we'll figure it out.
previously done 2 years ago. We'd like to see different level of performance. That was a tremendous step forward. I think it's not going to be good to do great to the with that being said, we have a big deal of better. And of course, years, God, the testing that the potentially different things that give or better or different. So, if you run the steps, you will be thinking, all you know is that's running that field over a period of time. That's the only way to come to know. Your focus was to do that, there's no way to do that to you. You feel that to
Right, so the comment was, if the testing is done during a wet period, then you're sort of biased toward a wet period, and you don't really know what would happen during the dry period. And for a large water withdrawal, like, for example, a large irrigation well, or for say a golf course, which by definition is 100,000 gallons a day, or municipal water supply, they often will require, EPA often requires the testing to be done during the dry season, so in August, September time period. For this type of well, both uses and the volumes we're proposing, that's not ever required, because the withdrawals are just so minor. That hose picture on the top there, that's what the entire facility would use for the whole day. That stream of water coming out of that hose, assuming 6,000 gallons a day for irrigation. So that stream of water is equivalent to the instantaneous flow for this entire facility, assuming 960 gallons a day for domestic and 6,000 gallons a day for irrigation. So that little stream of water right up there. So that just kind of puts it in the scale of things. An irrigation well pumping 100,000 gallons a day is 70 gallons a minute. It's like a fire hose, right? It's a much bigger scale. So because of that, DEP doesn't require that type of testing. Because it rarely leads, I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never seen an impact on a private well, especially one that far away. Yeah, they have municipal water there. It's a different animal. Is there a question over here? So, yeah, I think that pretty much covers it, just the sort of the summary of what the water uses are and what the sources are. And this is a map of the site with the neighborhood down on the bottom of the map. And so, with the 2 parcels that this facility will use is basically right on the property line, behind the smaller building at the top of the map is the public water supply well. You can see that little circle with the arrow pointing to it. And then down behind the larger building, on the southern portion of the parcel, it's hidden by all the arrows. But that's a convenient location for an irrigation well. We said, where would we like to put it? We'd like to put it right there, behind the building. That's just for convenience. It could go pretty much anywhere else on the property. But even if we put it in that location, we're still over 500 feet from the nearest private well. And that is the limit that the Board of Health requires for a private well. Yeah. Can you point to it with the pointer? Which well? The 2 wells, both of them. Yeah, so that's the public water supply well. If you can see the arrow there. Yep, that circle. And then down below that right there is where we would propose an irrigation well. Exactly, no. There's one existing well.
Yeah, you know, you say it's already doing that.
There is already an existing well there.
Okay, well,
Yep. And then the squares at the top there, those little rectangles at the top, those are the existing leach fields for the septic system. And really, this is just to give an idea of the distances we're talking about between everything. And that's about all I have to say. If anyone has any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'd be happy to stay after if people have questions. And if anyone wants to contact me at my office, they can certainly, I encourage it. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Yeah, one more question? When the test would be conducted, it really depends on the agreement, whether they can negotiate an agreement with the selectmen. The question is, do the selectmen make the final decision then?
There's a lot of people involved in the decision process. So the Board of Health, the Planning Board, and all these people are residents of the town, right? The Board of Selectmen, and we have to go through all those people. So the question was, sorry by the way, the question was, is it only the Board of Selectmen that make the decision? Is that? No. Yes, they say yes or no to the host community agreement. And then after the host community agreement, then we go through a special permitting process. And that is when we do this testing. And that's when we go through the Board of Health. So we would do testing then, and we would have to meet all the local bylaws. And that's what the Board of Health and the Selectmen and the Planning Board are in charge of, is making sure we meet your local bylaws. Question?
So the selectmen will not have their testing information before they make a decision on the agreement, is that right?
That is correct. Yes. The question was, will the selectmen have the testing information before making a decision on the HCA, which is one step in the process? And the answer is no, they will not have the testing before they make a decision on the HCA. They will be looking for public comments from the residents, but they will be making, the testing will occur during the special permitting process, which is something else we have to go through after this with the town.
So do you think you could help the selectmen make a decision if the numbers were different, or testing, let's say the testing shows that well, do you think that's how you impact decision making of the town? Do you think that information would be beneficial prior to them making the decision, which is tomorrow?
What's tomorrow?
Isn't that when you're going to start the HPA agreement? I thought I saw that on the slide.
That's when we,
The negotiation.
yeah, but we're not going to have a decision or a signing before mid-October.
Will your testing be done before that?
So the question was, will the testing be done before mid-October? And the testing won't be done until the special permitting process, which is after that. Because then we have to go through a special permitting process. If we don't get through that, then we don't have a business here.
The point I'm making is that this information won't be available for the selectmen when they make their decision.
Not for the HCA, no. So, just to repeat a couple things, you saw the picture of the flow through the hose. Our net water usage will average approximately 1/3 of that flow per day. 1/3. How much does a household use, an average household?
4-bedroom home uses by definition, 440 gallons per day in Massachusetts. That's what the Title V flow is, which is generally an overestimate. Now that's domestic water usage. It's 110 gallons per day per bedroom. It's 110 gallons per day per bedroom. It assumes 2 people per bedroom, 55 gallons per day. This is in Title V, 310 CMR 15. Yeah, so that's just how it's designed. The water systems are designed, and the septic systems, as Jacob mentioned, they're based on. But I understand. I'm just telling you, the way the regulations are written, it's 110 gallons per day per bedroom. And that's what we assume. It is an overestimate. It's generally an overestimate. Most houses don't use that amount, but that's what we design around.
So Steve, it's fine. You see, it's fine, really?
It's 310 CMR 15 is the regulation, and you can look it up.
I'm not saying he's fine. No, he's fine.
Yeah.
I didn't say he's fine.
Yeah. So if anyone's concerned, a household, any septic flows are listed in 310 CMR 15, which is the Massachusetts regulation Title V.
It doesn't really matter any of these, our water goes down because of this. That's the deal. It could be 10,000, it could be 2,000, it could be 100. There's going to be an impact. Yeah. It has to.
So the comment
And
was,
you even said, it doesn't matter if the water supply underneath is 10 feet next to each other or a mile apart. You said that one could influence the other or maybe not. We don't know.
yeah.
So he also said that in 30 years of doing this, he's never seen an impact.
We don't know. And I'm completely honest about that, but that's why we do the testing. That's the whole purpose of the testing. And we do the testing in a way that creates a condition that we will never see at the facility. That's the whole point. This is not the first time this approach has been taken. It's done all over the place, usually on flows significantly higher than this.
Do you want to say something?
Hi everyone, I'm Eric Yaffe, Local Engineers. So this is very early on in the process, and I'm actually here to talk about water usage and water control. But I just want to add something about the host community agreement and special permit hearing process. That host community agreement is an agreement with you as a community. And I feel like everybody's a little concerned with this water usage, and I would recommend that you are voicing your concerns, but that can be one of the provisions in the host community agreement. So I would just urge you to voice that opinion as you are, and put this in writing so that they can incorporate that into the host community agreement. That way you can move forward with assurance that something will be done, and that you'll feel you can sleep at night knowing that if you're affected by the water usage, that something will be done, or that if they test and somehow you're affected, that they'll figure out another approach to it, whether it's trucking water in or something. But that's what the point of the host community agreement is for. And also the special permit is another process that's a public hearing, but you'll also be able to voice your concerns there. And when you receive a special permit with the town, there are conditions listed on that special permit. So this isn't one of those things where they get a golden ticket called an HCA and they can just move forward and do whatever they want. There are very strict conditions under all of this host community agreement and the special permit. Well, I think whoever the agreement is with, the select board is the host community agreement, and then the planning board is who awards you the special permit.
We got to this part, this is the third road. We raise these concerns over and over. So the people that need to hear that, they definitely heard.
So with that being said, I was going to just touch on that. the reason I'm here is to just discuss the water reclamation. A question did come up earlier about the 6,000 gallons, about how much water is being stored on site. The number has been thrown around 6,000 gallons. That is the maximum water usage by the plants in the facility, the most they'll ever use based on 30,000 square feet of canopy, which is plant square footage. That is the absolute max. I know they might not go that big, but we're just trying to be conservative as engineers. That means we will have a 6,000 gallon tank on site with water stored, okay? That being said, we have a pump, pumps water to the plants. Those plants take water in, and they transpire it out. We take the nutrients out of the water, photosynthesis happens, the moisture gets transpired into the air, and through my HVAC system that I'll be designing, we'll reclaim that water out of the air and drain it back to that 6,000 gallon tank, okay? And this is gonna be 90% efficient. So, as engineers, we like to be conservative, so technically we'll only be using 600 gallons per day, but we're saying 1,800 just to be conservative, because we might have to use certain filtration equipment that requires wash down, and it's not 100% efficient. So keep in mind that these numbers are conservative, so the facility will use between 600 and 1,800 gallons a day of water. But the 6,000 gallons is actually fresh water stored on site that we recycle continuously.
So, taking your numbers, the average household uses 420 gallons a day. How are you guys going to use 600 gallons a day? When you're going to have one facility cultivating all these plants?
So the question is, if a household uses 400 and something gallons per day, how are we only going to use 600 gallons per day? And the answer to that is, when you take a shower or flush the toilet, it goes down the drain. We're watering plants. The plants consume that water, they transpire it in the air, and we're able to capture that out of the air and pump it back to a tank. So we're not using standard plumbing. This is an irrigation system. Question is, are we going to pull 90% of the water from the air? And that is correct. It's a dehumidification system. So the plants, any plant, grass, when it takes in water, it doesn't drink it. It actually, the stomata opens and that water is transpired into the air. Oh, so it's an indoor grow. So if it were to evaporate, we would have all that water and condensation all over the walls. We have an HVAC system that pulls that air, it runs it across a coil, just like a dehumidifier you would have in your basement. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So I just want to be clear, Joel didn't say that the average household uses 410 gallons a day. He said that is the regulation. And he did say that the regulation is probably set over the amount that an average household would use a day. I don't know what an average household would actually use a day. I don't know if anybody does, but.
Just to follow up on that, Title V assumes 2 people in every bedroom using 55 gallons per day every day. That's where that 440 gallons comes from. So clearly that's an overestimate. Not every house in town has 2 people per bedroom, 4 bedrooms. So it'd be 8 people in the home. It's just not the case. But the systems are designed that way, and the septic systems are designed that way to provide adequate supply and wastewater disposal.
So I hope that helps as far as, is there any more questions on water? Are we doing order next? Okay.
So this is Jacob Lemieux from Hancock Associates. Thank you, Jacob. And he's going to talk about the septic plans.
Good afternoon. So most of the information that for wastewater has already been covered in previous slides. Fairly simple on this site. There are two existing septic systems. Both of them are PVC pipe and stone leach field systems. I think go back to that a little bit first. So the lower building, the upper building has a septic system with a capacity for 75 employees. We are proposing less than that. I think we're proposing about 45, was it, at max employee count?
50, probably 58 now.
Right, 45, 50 at max. So we've got quite a bit of overhead in Title V capacity. The lower system, it needs to be analyzed to determine its capacity. It has some Title V inspection plans, but there isn't an actual as-built on file. So we've got to go out there, take a closer look at that, see what the square footage is for leaching area, and determine the capacity of that system. But we're fairly confident that it's, already having the 75 employee capacity, the existing systems will be able to remain in place. They have passed Title V inspections in 2017, 2019, and I believe just recently as well. So they're in fair working order, and we'll be recommending that Title V inspections be done after the first few years as employee counts increase to ensure that the systems are maintaining their operational capabilities. And that will be for the domestic flows. And just to clarify, for Title V regulations, it's 110 gallons per day per bedroom of the house, and there's a 330 gallon per day minimum for new system construction. So the flows that, the domestic flows that we'll actually be using around that 45, 50 employee mark is equivalent to 6, 7 bedroom single family home. So in terms of the Title V regulated flows, the processed water, and that's any of the water that comes out of the plants that is not recaptured in the recycling or the dehumidification efforts, will, as we said before, go the way to a holding tank, as that's legally it cannot be discharged into the ground without treatment. That you need a specialized facility. So we'll be storing all of that water, all the processed runoff water, into a separate tank that is not connected to the domestic flow water or the septic systems on site to be removed. That basically covers my section. So you see the two green rectangles? Oh yeah, he asked where is the leach field on the map. So there are two of them. They're right up on the Main Street side of the site. There are those two green rectangles shown right there. Yeah, so I think just to repeat the question. The question was whether or not the irrigation wastewater is going to be separate from the domestic water flows that go to these systems. Right, yeah, so those flows will have to be captured and end up in that holding tank. Yeah, so periodically, and that's something that we'll have to work out with the Board of Health. We'll create a periodic pumping schedule, which we'll refine once operation and the facility really tightens up its water usages, because the efficiency of our recycling will go up as years go by and the facility dials in its water use. But yeah, so it will need to be periodically trucked out to a treatment facility. Yeah, it'll have to go to a treatment facility somewhere else in the state that's already set up to handle this sort of waste. Yes, one of them is in the parking lot, right in front of the smaller building towards the Main Street side of the lot. And the other field is off of the parking lot in a grass area, off of the entrance off of Main Street. Yes. He asked if the existing leach field was beneath the asphalt in the parking lot. Yes, it is.
You have a question for Jacob?
Thank you.
Okay, Eric, take it back up.
Okay, yeah, this is, question, concern about odor control. So,
You want to find the
no, this is fine, that's fine. So, marijuana produces odors. I think everybody agrees with that. Early on in medical marijuana, the startup of medical marijuana in Massachusetts, odor control wasn't really on everybody's radar, even though it's been done out west. A lot of the early medical marijuana facilities in Massachusetts don't have much odor control. So if you go and visit those sites, you'll notice that a lot of them emit a lot of marijuana odors. It's kind of known. If you've ever visited them or been in the vicinity of them. And to be honest, a lot of people that grow marijuana in their basements or in their sheds or whatever, it's legal to do so out of your own home. You might actually smell it driving around the neighborhood. So one of the priorities of Good Leaf is to make sure that you won't be affected by those odors. We've built a multifaceted approach for this facility that is, I like to say, it's belt and suspenders approach. We're doing 4 things. Most people might do 1, and we're doing 4 of these proven technologies to ensure that you people aren't affected. So the first approach is based on building pressure. We strategically pressurize the building so that odors aren't escaping. So the entire building will be leak tested. They'll do blower door tests in all the flower rooms to make sure everything is sealed properly. And then essentially what we'll do is bring fresh air into the flower rooms. We'll treat that air that's inside the flower rooms, and we'll install odor filtration within the flower rooms. Then the quarters and bathrooms will be in negative pressure, so that air will flow from the outside into the middle of the building and then exhaust it out of the roof at a high velocity. Before it's exhausted though, it's treated with, like I said, once in the flower rooms where the plants are, that air is circulated at least 30 air changes per hour. So every 2 minutes, air is circulated through an air filter that reduces odors. So if you were to go into this room with no airflow and no filtration, it would smell strong. You'd have a strong smell of marijuana. With this filtration system, you walk into that room, you'll detect odors, but not even nearly as bad as it would, not as strong as it would be without that. So that air, it's pressurized, pulled into the corridor where it's exhausted out of the building. The first treatment in that exhaust system is carbon filtration. This is used in industries worldwide, the garbage industry, hospital industry, several industries I'm sure you've heard of carbon filtration. So it passes through that carbon filter and then it proceeds to be exhausted out of the building, but before it exits the building, there's this fog post system where it injects an odor neutralization that mixes with the air to neutralize any remaining odors. So just to kind of summarize that again, we're pressurizing the building. None of the air in the building is going to escape. You open a front door, you're not going to get a gust of air that has odor in it. You'll get air will actually get pulled into the building. The second means is filtration within the flower rooms, reducing odors in the building. And then the third and fourth means is right in that exhaust system, so all the air being exhausted is being treated twice before it's blown into the atmosphere. Question?
The question is, have you ever done this before?
We have I've implemented this at about 4 facilities now, and they're currently being built. Yeah, there are no facilities that are up and running. I was involved in a lot of the early on medical marijuana facilities that didn't have these requirements yet.
Where are they located?
Which ones?
Any of them?
I can't really share that information because NDAs, but you can go online and look for any facilities that you can search for them if you like.
You can't tell where these facilities are being built.
Yes, the question is, can I tell him where facilities are being built? And the answer is, no, I cannot tell you where they're being built. I signed non-disclosure agreements with all of these companies.
What company building is it? Is it this company or a different company? I don't
Question is, what
I'm trying to
company?
understand why you can't tell us where you're building your facilities.
Question is, why can't I tell you what facilities I'm designing with this system?
I didn't say designing, you said they're being built right now.
Question is, why can't I tell you what facilities are being built? And the answer is, I've signed non-disclosure agreements with these companies. Next question. Understood that. So the question is, the system, the fog post system that's treating the air before it's exhausted, does it have any odors like a perfume? And the answer is, it is not a masking agent. It does not have any odor. It is an odor neutralization system. So it wouldn't be non-detectable by you.
I think we understand that wind is unpredictable and often it will probably flow uphill, which is why we've got the best in the business are doing a belt and suspenders approach.
So if this hasn't been built, how do we know it works, or how can you assure us that there won't be any odors in that room?
Question is, how do I ensure that you won't have any odors in your neighborhood?
Right, this hasn't
I can give you more information on the technology, and we can educate you as much as you would like. I'm very confident it's going to be successful, but I'm not sure of a way to guarantee that you will never detect any other stuff.
Right, and that's what we're concerned with. So, and that's why I was asking before, where do we go somewhere else and see a facility in process? If I go up to Springfield, and I drive down the highway, I can smell the marijuana facility. And that, I was just gonna swing by and see one of your facilities and see how it operates and if there's any odor. But if none are built, and this is a prototype that has never been built, how do we get assured that we're not gonna have an issue in our neighborhood?
Question is, if this is a prototype and there are no facilities that have been built using this type of system, how are you assured that this will work? And my answer is, we can give you more information on each technology and educate you as much as we can and answer any questions. But until this facility is up and running, you'll never be convinced until you actually see it in operation. Next question. Can you speak a little bit louder? I'm sorry.
RHP is a company prior to what has been interested in manufacturing this. And they were in this local and local industry and local. They had no interest in cultivating. And the primary takeaway that was drawn out of their interest was look at it, not like to everyone that was on the street that came to me. You don't want cultivation board. I mean, this is really convenient, but it's not the one can't really small. And the really is that technology is really good. I'm sure it's in this other systems. I'm kind of thinking, that's what why cultivation, irrigation is well. My experience in Colorado and California, when the snow is the week, you can get driving on the house of work. Not from really doing a business, but one thing that I do is, you go in and do it with a lot of good work. But the zoning bylaw for both really things. Lower ground, the mineral water cannot be affected by a person with a low centric smell. The bacteria of the mineral water establishment are only the generally used to property. Whoever is above your boundary is remaining, can't smell it, clearly it's not water. So you can't say, you can't go in and say, I'm pretty sure it's good. Choose that water. It's kind of crazy.
Question is, well, the comment is, it's in the bylaws that says odor cannot be detected at the property line.
No, it says that when you look
At an adjoining residence, which would be the property line, right? To my understanding, so in adjoining, so essentially all of your neighbors at that property line cannot detect odors. And that is the reason why we're implementing this belt and suspenders approach. I will add to the last gentleman's question that you can look up a lot of this technology online. I'm happy to share some of the published data by testing companies. One of them in particular, Fog Hub, has actually been implemented out west on an outdoor grow facility. It was a farm, marijuana farm, that was getting complaints from miles away. They implemented this fog coast system where they surrounded the farm with these spray nozzles and injected them sprayed them into the air, and the complaints disappeared. So this is why I'm actually confident in speaking about this, because I've seen the studies and I've read about that particular technology, that it was successful in an outdoor grow. If we can't keep this odor contained that's why I'm confident we can keep the odor contained inside a building and then treat between 3,000 and 5,000 CFM of exhaust air. It's a small amount of air that we're exhausting out of the building, so that's the amount of air that we have to treat. That company is Fogco, and I have all of this data that I can share. Somehow we can share it. I have a lot of studies that have been completed that is public information that I can share so that you can all read that and send questions as you please. Question is, if the facility opens and this is implemented and there are still odors, what happens? And my response is, I'm confident that won't happen, but I'll let Ben.
Sure. Then we'll need to talk about what the solution is with the town authorities and the residents. And we don't anticipate that happening. We're spending a lot of money on the system. It raises the cost of what we're doing appreciably because we want to be good corporate citizens to this town. And what we haven't talked about is there are some benefits to this whole process that accrue to the entire town. Maybe that doesn't concern the neighbors as much. I don't really know, but there are some benefits. But in any case, this is the state-of-the-art technology. It's expensive, and we wouldn't do it unless we thought it would work. So this is what we can do ahead of time, and then if we still have a problem, we'll have to figure it out then with us all sitting around the table. Any other questions on this? Okay, do you want to talk about the recycling? I'll bring that slide back up. You did. I don't know. All right. So, okay. Let me put my glasses back on, please. Thank you. So, noise control. This is something that we have hired somebody called Sept for, maybe Cavalieri. Again, we have tried to match everybody's expertise in this room with the people that aren't in this room in terms of hiring the best people and addressing it with a full service solution. And the way this process works, Eric, if I get this wrong.
So I've worked with Andy Cavaliero of Sept for many years, and on these types of facilities, this process happens a lot. What the Sept does, they're acoustical consultants, they're acoustic engineers. What they do is they come in and they take baseline measurements of basically at the property lines to determine what the quietest time. They'll place meters in there at the property lines for, I believe, 2 weeks. And they'll sense the decibel levels at the property lines. And per DEP standards, when you fit out this facility, you can't exceed a 10 decibel increase. This being, from what I've heard, I'm not familiar with the area, but it's a pretty quiet neighborhood. There's not much in the area, so it's going to be pretty quiet. What we do as we design, in my I'm a mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection engineer. We are, the loudest equipment in that facility would be equipment that I specify, and that's typically a chiller that goes outside and a generator. What we do is work with Andy and the Centec to ensure that his software, he'll take the cut sheets on the chiller and the generator and put it into his software. He'll be able to determine the decibel level at the property lines. And then we'll basically, he'll go through anything necessary to ensure that we don't exceed those decibel levels. And then after everything is installed, he'll come back out with those meters, run all of the equipment, and ensure that it doesn't exceed those decibel levels. So that is essentially a guarantee that it will not be a noisy facility. Question is, that is after they're in, and my answer is yes, they actually test it. I have not done the math. The chiller will so we haven't figured out the options yet, but we'll either have an air-cooled chiller outside, most likely 2 air-cooled chillers, or we'll have cooling towers with an indoor chiller. All right, so the question is, how many cooling towers or chillers will there be? My answer is most likely 2 for redundancy. If one ever goes down, you want to be able to operate the other one. And the comment was they're pretty loud. I agree. That is why we work with Andy. We've implemented quiet technologies, ultra-low sound fans, sound blankets, acoustic walls on facilities that had residences very close and were very sensitive to noise. So.
Place across the street, one day, never really, I think the public gets additional powers. We could do that all day long. That's the next place.
So the comment.
At some point, you're gonna have, let's say, it's gonna be running. But when that building go down, it's gonna have to have the power, keep all the plants. That thing will run the board. You know, power, we have, we know how power.
And so the comment was that these machines, cooling towers, chillers, and generators are noisy, and my response is the same as I led off with. This is the point of that testing procedure. I know that they're typically loud, they're typically noisy. You've probably experienced this with a chiller. That's a backup generator. But this exercise you can be assured that this exercise will take place and that there is a DEP standard that we need to abide by. Yeah, so I guess the question was, and the comment was that these machines are loud, and if after it's built, who do you take it up with? I believe that like I said, that this testing is going to happen. If something happens down the line in the future that causes these machines to be louder than they were tested, I would, as a citizen, right? So what I'm saying, we'll do a baseline, then a Centec runs a model through a software that will determine. But then there is testing after to commission the equipment to ensure that it's not noisy. So you'll have testing results that indicate that the decibel levels have not exceeded 10 decibels higher than the baseline. After the fact, so you're ensured that when the facility opens, it's not noisy. Let's say a year down the line, you notice that there's been an uptick of noise, call the town, they'll bring a Centec back in, retest, and if it's above the levels, then something will have to be done to remedy that situation. That's why we're the professionals, I guess. We're tasked with we've taken on the task of having to guarantee that you will not be affected by this. So I appreciate the launch.
We can hear a lot more from their doing the water facility. We can hear. So if you think like running an enormous cooling tower is going to be quieter than a lawnmower, how do you try?
So the comment was that you can hear a lawnmower, so if we can be quieter than a lawnmower, you'd be surprised. If that's the case, and we cannot, for some reason, get lower than 10 decibels above the baseline, then exactly, then there'll have to be another means, but that is the task that we're faced with. I'm confident it can happen.
I'm gonna chase our neighborhood doesn't understand why this is a great location for a marijuana facility. We don't get it. It's not a good fit. There's no way it's a good fit. It's not a good fit for you. It's not a good fit for our town. You're not going to get that. Why are you guys letting yourself to here? In Massachusetts, there's plenty of places where you could build a facility. Plenty of places. And you want to create this neighborhood to come in and change, the entire neighborhood with either smell, destroy our water supply, noise pollution. I don't get it. Like, why is this so desirable? Why is the property you're so in love with? Why don't you go to a place that you welcome you, or a place that has the facility, that has the water, that has noise already going on, where you can disrupt it? Like the city. Why is Bolton like the premier location for a marijuana facility or a dispensary? I guess I just don't get it.
So the question was, why do we think that Bolton, in particular, I think 58 Main Street, but Bolton in general, is a good location for this facility? And why are we doing something that some people don't like? And why would we like it and it wouldn't be good for us and it wouldn't be good for you? I think those are all opinions, and there are different opinions, number one. But number two, it is zoned industrially. We're spending, I'm not going to disclose the number, but multi-millions of dollars to address all these issues, which I don't think you individually will probably never accept, no matter what we say. So, but we're spending millions of dollars on it. And for the noise control, for example, they test, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they test 24 hours a day, and you have to meet the 10 decibel increase at the quietest part of the day. And there's nothing even operating there anymore, so it's going to be silent in terms of the activity inside the building. That's going to be our baseline, as a for instance. Then we're hiring a Centec, we're hiring Eric to figure out the best equipment possible. So we're making every effort to make sure that there's no unpleasantness for for the neighborhood. But I get the feeling that no matter what we do, it won't matter. You guys just don't like the idea or the concept of it.
That's not true.
Well, now, no, let me finish, please. Let me finish. Now, why do we like the site? We like the site because it has two buildings on it. It's the right size. It is surrounded by trees, so it's unobtrusive to most people, to cars, to whatever. We're designing the site so that you'll see in a minute there'll be no more traffic, even having an option of going up Openwood's Way, because we're going to close off all the egresses and egresses, except one, which the town wants to keep open with it just a breakaway gate so that emergency vehicles can get in if needed. But we're going to landscape the other egresses and egresses, which will make that Boltonwoods Way actually, the roadside at least, nicer. There are presumably some financial benefits, and presumably other people in town that feel differently than you, because the town voted to have this overlay in the town. So, I don't know what else to tell you, but we're making our best efforts, and we try to express that here. And if no matter what we say, it's not going to make a difference, then it's not going to make any difference. But our intentions are to spend millions of dollars to make this a positive net experience for everybody in town. So wait a minute, please. There's going to be no traffic because we won't be using Boltonwoods Way. We'll be using a driveway off 117, and there'll be no minors allowed in the building. Pardon me? Do you hear that? The closest school is 3 miles away. Yeah, so the legal limit is 500 feet, and we're 3 miles. So that's 15,000 feet, or almost 16,000 feet.
So, I'd like to follow up on what you said.
Sure.
So, you said that you're spending millions and millions of dollars to accommodate this, which you're basically making my point, which is, why do you want to spend all that extra money when you don't have to invest in a facility? You don't need to do that if you go to a facility that fits your needs.
That's not true. That's not. Okay.
I let you finish. So you said that you're spending all these millions to accommodate this. So obviously this isn't financially a good fit for you either. Financially, you're gonna have to spend all the money to do that. You're gonna have to spend all the money for the well. You're gonna have to spend all the money for that, the odor. So you have to spend all the stuff. You're developing all this brand new technology to accommodate odors. And you're going to be influencing a small neighborhood with children and bus stops, and I mean, it just doesn't make sense. You guys could go anywhere in the state and find a better facility where you spend a fraction of what you're going to spend for the odor, for the water, for all the equipment. It seems like a nightmare for what you guys are doing, and you're upsetting an entire community. So I'm just putting it out there for you guys to think about, is like, think about what you're doing. You're wedging yourself into a place where I thought you have the market for a song like that. You can get talking for a song. Why do you want to come into the backyard or a neighborhood of these people and disrupt us? I don't get it.
Well, first of all, we don't want to disrupt anybody, number one. Number two, we do this anywhere because we want to do corporate citizens. So it doesn't matter where we go. This would be our approach, and we have thought about it very carefully. We have thought about it a lot. And so these are things we would want to do anywhere because that's what being part of good corporate citizenship is with a local town. So we would do this anywhere. So that's the answer to the question. The question was, why do we want to do this here? Because we have to spend millions and millions of dollars. And the answer was, we'd be spending those millions of dollars anywhere because we want to take the responsible approach to building this business and working with the community. So that's the answer to the question. Yep. No, we don't. There'll be a test, and there's no activity in the buildings right now. Yep. So the map, I just want to let you know that the map that we showed is a geo map, and what was said was it's not quite 2 football fields, it's more than 500 feet. Yeah, it's more than 500 feet, it's 2 football fields. A little less than 2 football fields, which is 500 and something feet, okay? So it's definitely not 500 yards. That would be, yeah, no, it's 500 and something feet. Yeah, me too. I know what you mean. I understand completely. Okay. Oh, sorry. Would you mind just?
Sorry, I wanted to ask you about
Yes. So the question was, can you explain the process again? And my first answer is going to be, we should share the actual process. We can share that process in writing so that you know exactly. I'm going to give you a summary, and I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm not the acoustic engineer. He wasn't able to make it tonight. But what I believe the process is to be is he'll place sensors at the property lines for 2 weeks, and that will trend the sound levels over a period of 2 weeks, 24 hours a day for 14 days straight. That lowest decibel level you will not be able to exceed 10 decibels above that level when the facility is up and running. That means chillers, cooling towers, everything running. We will not be able to exceed 10 decibels above that baseline. Question is, will we be fined? I do not know that answer.
We have to meet the DEP regulations one way or the other, so there's a process that is going to require us to meet those regulations.
The question is that going all of the way up the street? I don't know that answer. I would guess that there's multiple sensors placed around the proximity of the property. Most likely the closest areas, but again, I'd urge you to check check in with us, ask that question, and we can have the Centec give you a procedure. Yeah, I think this gentleman had a question too. Yeah, the question would be, could these property line, which you're going to have several property lines around the perimeter of the property, so I would suspect that multiple sensors would be placed around the perimeter of that. So essentially, if there's a chiller or a generator, that you would be sensing for all of the neighbors, essentially.
that's here, that's the property. You keep that, I think that's very, you guys can see it, where it's at. Who do you go to? You know, you don't know exactly what it is you're getting at.
The question is, who do you go to if we exceed the noise levels that are required? And like I said, with that procedure, they actually use software to determine that at the property lines we will not exceed it. Then it is tested. We will not be able to get a certificate of occupancy if those levels are exceeded. So it's a pretty black and white process. This is one thing that you could say, it's black and white. Bottom line is, they won't open if it's too noisy. I'm pretty confident in saying that this is one of those things that's black and white.
Any other questions on noise? Okay. By the way, we're getting close to the end, and then we'll stick around for questions, feedback, whatever you want. I will. So there are three means of egress and ingress between Bolton Woods Way and the site off Bolton Woods Way. And the plan is to close off the upper and lower means of egress and ingress with landscaping, which should make the roadside actually nicer. And leave only the middle one open. And that used to be left open only for emergency vehicles. And so it will have a breakaway gate in it so that if the firemen need to get in, or the police need to get in, or anybody else, just like any other industrial site, they can break through the gate and get through. But there'll be no regular traffic going even through the middle egress. Instead, what will happen is we will be using the driveway, which is closer towards Stowe, off 117, exclusively for our own traffic. So that's number one. Number two, contrary to many other industrial uses that this property could be used for, the traffic needed to supply the facility and the traffic needed to take the facility's production and bring it elsewhere is de minimis, small, minute, whatever. What we have is really everything that we buy is small and light, and everything that we would be shipping out is small and light, unless we use a soil medium, which we are unlikely to use at this point. We're more likely to use a hydroponic system. So, like the past use for the facility, they made industrial equipment. They trucked in a lot of heavy materials and they trucked them out. And we're not going to have any of that. Almost all the traffic is going to be from in and out of our facility will be employee cars, trucks, SUVs, and a few vans here and there. That's the delivery vans, everything that we could possibly want to take off the property to deliver to other places would easily fit in a small van. And most of the supplies we get will come in through packages. So the traffic levels should be de minimis. I have a slide on this to show you a little bit about what we're talking about, but it's somewhat repetitive to what I've said. So these are the three egresses. So we close off 1 and 3. We landscape so that they were fully closed off. We essentially close off the middle one, except for there will be a breakaway gate, so we can't landscape it because we need the breakaway gate to let the emergency vehicles have access. If it weren't for that, we'd be happy to close that off too with landscaping, but it's not, it would be ill-advised. Are there any questions on the traffic?
The previous, presenters, they were about 1 or 2,
No, this is what the town told us that they would prefer, so we're doing what they,
it was opposite before. It was, the third. That's not a change, it changed.
we're, we're doing whatever the town thinks is best for the citizens in discussion with the fire chief and police chief and all those officials. That's why we've met with all those people. We're just being told what to do. So, and we're going to do it. Any other questions? Okay. Let's see what else is here. Well, it's going to be roughly somewhere between 40 and 60 employees. The last place has 75 employees, so it's going to be a lot less than what it was. And it's not going to be a lot of employees for the size of the space. So other likely uses of the space, my point is that other likely uses of the space would probably have a lot more in terms of heavy deliveries, a lot more in terms of both in and out, and a lot more in terms of employee traffic. Well, we don't know that. They're largely, it's largely going to be packages and small vans. Because if we don't order soil, then we're ordering some nutrients and some seeds. And Vin, do you want to talk a little bit about this? What we need to have coming into the facility.
So in terms of what we would need coming in the facility is really very small compared to most manufacturing facilities. We're going to get mostly everything delivered by UPS, FedEx, and businesses like that. So it shouldn't cause any kind of issue like that. Does that answer your question? Okay, so you're wondering in terms of product leaving our facility, what that traffic would look like? Yeah, so that wouldn't be more than 1, maybe 2 van-sized vehicles at a time per day. So that at maximum for vehicles leaving our facility, not counting vehicles of UPS, FedEx. It would be more of a mobile delivery to another business. So it's not like a retail delivery from house to house. It would be a large amount of product going to a retail establishment where they will sell. Well, we're not going to send a van out, for every single transaction. It would be compiled into a group. Sure.
Because the person Nick is going to do shipping all over the state. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of traffic going in and out of the facility.
Well, Nick was going to have a dispensary there, number one, which we're not going to have, and that was going to be most of the traffic. Number two, if you think about the inventory, if you had a 6x6 foot cabinet, this is the inventory of finished product, whether it be flour or the kind of manufactured product that Vinny's an expert in making, the kind of flour that Kenny's an expert in producing. All of this stuff, you could have $10 million of that fit in a 6x6 cabinet. That's how big our exports out of this facility are going to be. And we're not going to export $10 million a day. So whether we're going to have There'll probably be days where we have no deliveries going out. There's probably gonna be a day where we have one or two vans going out. There may be a day where we have a few more than that. But on average, it's not gonna, I'd be surprised if the average is one a day. We don't, so that's the likely range. And this is certainly gonna be a lot less traffic than almost any other use for this facility. And there's a lot of things, I'll talk about that later. Yes? I didn't really, right, we said right from the start, and this will definitely be true, this site will not, we will not deliver out of this site to consumers. We will not have any retail there. It's purely manufacturing and cultivation. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions about that? Thank you. So this is the security and emergency planning summary. So first of all, the CCC has very strong regulations around making sure you know where everything in your inventory is through what's called seed to sale tracking systems. So we need to be able to track every single seed from seed to its final destination that comes out of our facility, and we'll be able to report that to the authorities. So this goes towards the possibility of theft and all those kinds of things. So that's one level. Then we will also be working with the chiefs, the fire and the police, to develop. They'll have input into our diversion plan, which is what seed to sale tracking system is the basic system for. We're going to require all employees to go through all the CCC training about emergency situations and diversion. I've already talked about the seed to sale system. We're going to collaborate with the chiefs to design and implement an emergency notification and response protocols. Both systems will have redundancies. We will collaborate with the chief of police to design and implement a full camera and video system with exterior lighting that meets all the appropriate light pollution requirements. In other words, mostly it'll be pointing down. And where the cameras are placed and everything. It's going to be all done with the expertise of your chiefs in collaboration with them. And then we're going to ensure sufficient internet access so that in the event of emergencies and things like that, we can communicate with the exterior world. That is sometimes a situation where if you don't do special things and you have a cement floor, that can be difficult, but we're going to do all those things. And then, as I said, we're going to build in redundancies into power outage problems as well. So that's a summary of what we plan on doing from an emergency and diversion standpoint. Are there any questions on that? Fire what? Okay. I don't know the answer to that question because it's never come up. And we have no, they don't talk to us about what happens outside of our own site. We have no idea what happens outside of the site we would like to build on. So that's totally up to the town and you guys. Yeah, I do know what you mean. The question was, since we're building a facility there, we hope to build a facility there. And what happens in the event that creates a possibility that we have an emergency event there, which would require fire truck resources and water. And does the fact that we're building there mean that they might do something about your pond? Is that the right question? Sure. We have not had any conversation as of yet, but if you want to give feedback to the selectmen and make it a point, then we'll probably wind up talking about it with John Love. And I don't know what they'll decide. Obviously, it would be off the proposed site, so we would have no say. But so I would suggest that you encourage the town to have that discussion with you. We're probably not a part of that discussion because, as I say, well, okay. Okay, that's great. We're open to any discussions.
The fire department specifically picked the middle road because we have a fire pump station there. So I'm going to say 80% of the building already has a fire suppression system. So we're going to have to probably upgrade it and add additional, but there's an already existing fire pump station. Did that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions on this? By the way, added to the security protocol, well, I have another slide on it anyway, so we'll go through this slide. No, that's not it. Where is it? I need my glasses. So I know this is small writing. I was trying to fit a lot on one page. So first of all, there'll be no on-site retail, and that will limit access needs to town officials, employees, and third parties, which is radically different than if there were a retail site there or a lot of an industrial site with lots of visitors, salespeople, things like that. Then we're going to have this complete seed-to-sale inventory tracking system and our own robust inventory management system and reporting systems. We're going to have a controlled access by keypad or electronic card system at every exit and entry, and there'll be a no minor entry policy. And there's no reason why anybody would want to come to this site anyway, because it's just cultivation.
and production. So the only people that will be going to the site are the people that need to do business there. Otherwise, there won't be any traffic. We're going to have restricted areas. They all will be signed. They will all have locking doors. By signed, I mean there'll be signs saying they are restricted areas. And in all the areas where there's either product or cash, all those will be limited to only certain employees that need to function out of those areas. Nobody else will be allowed in those areas. We will also, in terms of video, lighting, all that kind of stuff, there's going to be a very robust system there, again, with the input from the town and the chiefs. We're going to have a strict badge policy. All cash will be kept in a vault in its own separate room. Perimeter lighting, I think I've already described. Same with the video system. So we'll have a backup generator for the emergency system. And then we'll have a set of standard operating procedures that we're going to submit to this CCC as part of our application for an approval for a license. And they have also very robust regulations. And we're going to go through this CCC certified responsible vendor training for all our employees. So those are the more specifics of the earlier slide. Does that bring up any questions or? Okay. Yeah, we're going to have that. Yeah, so we will have whatever they recommend, but there will be direct communication from stations, number one. And number two, the actual incidents of robbery, other than small, what is typically a problem in a lot of facilities is what is called employee diversion, where employees take small amounts and don't report it. But that generally gets noticed because it's easy to sale tracking system. And actually there's very little intended crime from outside coming in and trying to rob. Very little. So that's actually quite unlikely, just so you know. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Okay, we're going to try and finish up pretty quickly here. This is kind of the last slide. So, where practical, we will give hiring priority to hiring local qualified vendors for the construction and maintenance and continued operation of the facility with the intention of, giving business to local businesses and hopefully developing a relationship with them. The most senior executive positions in the company are in this room. We have a few other people in line for marketing already and a few other things, but for all the other positions, we will give priority. It won't be the only measuring stick, but we'll give priority to hire qualified local residents if everything else is being equal. And that should also be a benefit, we hope, to the community. The community impact fees, the fees that we've suggested are substantially larger than what would have been under IHP. So that also should improve the tax revenue of the town. And that should accrue to hopefully many benefits of the town. It's up to the town how that's spent, it's not up to us. But I presume whenever the town spends money, it's for the good of the residents. So that should also improve things. And we will make sure that we don't infringe on any wetlands and public use trails. We know there's a hiking trail called Annie's, I think, and we're going to make sure that we don't impact that at all. And, we want to try and support any town events, anything like that. And I do want to close with one last thing before we open it up to questions sort of after the presentation. You can come up so that we're not holding everybody who wants to leave up. But this space can be used for many uses. The fact that we're in a highly regulated business, I would think would actually give you guys comfort. We have to do much more extensive water testing. We have to do much more extensive noise testing. We have to do much more extensive odor control. We're not going to have any retail space. There's going to be no industrial trucks coming through or going out. It's all extremely, because there's so many regulations, it's much more of a known quantity than many other things that go into the site. And I hope you in the neighborhood in particular will consider that as you consider us as a potential neighbor. We would love to be your neighbor. I know this is sometimes a difficult process, and I know you guys may feel some anger, and I apologize for that. And I hope we didn't get excitable or offend you in any way. We don't need to. We want to be good neighbors for you guys. And I really do think that that not only because of what the business is, but also because of the way we want to approach it, which is belt suspenders with all the technology, which is why the third time around, the selectmen have been encouraging us because they think they've made a judgment after dealing with us intimately for a number of months now that we're responsible people. They've looked at our resumes. They've seen, for example, all the charity work that I do on my resume with my own free time. Lots of things like that, the history with the town. And so I think there are broad benefits to the town, and I think those benefits will accrue to everybody, including those living in the neighborhood. And we will do our best to be as good corporate neighbors as we can. And so with that, as part of that spirit, I'll stick around, even though we were supposed to end about an hour ago. I can't say that much about my team, but I will stick around and happy to meet anybody and exchange information. And Dennis, were you keeping a list by any chance of everything we're supposed to get back to these guys on? No, but we can get them. Anyway, if we omit getting back to you on anything, feel free to call the town and ask them to call us to reach out to you. Give them your contact, and we will reach out to you. And we don't, this is our first time through something like this. We're not used to it. It's not smooth. We didn't have a lawyer here. This is just, us just coming here and trying to be open. So that's what we're trying to do. If we miss something, again, there's ways to communicate with us, and feel free to follow up through the town and get our contact information. So I did want to let everybody else go, so perhaps you can come up with your question. We can talk one-to-one. Is that okay? Okay. I have so much trouble hearing you. If you could come up, it would be helpful. What? Pardon me? But we may very well put a dispensary somewhere in Boston. We may very well put one, we don't know where. I can't hear you.
There's no solid plan to put the dispensary on the radar anywhere in particular.
Yeah, it's too preliminary. This is the longest process, so we wanted to start this first. So if you could save the questions to come up and talk, and any other of the audience who wants to listen can come up. That way, I just can't hear you. And we gotta let some people leave who don't want to. Does anybody live near a dispensary? A dispensary? None of the five of us do. Does anybody live near a cultivation? So, all right, so this is the end of the presentation. Please come up if you have any questions, but we gotta let people go.